I think I didn't do anything wrong. I just let his best friend touch me as a joke at a party. But now, I'm staring at divorce papers with my name on them. I never thought my husband would actually go this far. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The Friday night gathering at our suburban home started innocently enough. Ethan had just gotten home from another exhausting day debugging code, his shoulders slumped with fatigue. Our 8-year-old daughter, Sophie, was upstairs doing homework, and I was feeling restless, craving some excitement in our predictable routine. When Deacon arrived with his usual charismatic grin and a bottle of wine, I felt that familiar spark of attention I'd been missing. My sister Maya had come over earlier, and Ethan's parents, Helen and Paul, stopped by for dinner. What should have been a quiet family evening was about to become something much more complicated. "Come on, Ethan, lighten up," I said, noticing how he barely acknowledged Deacon's enthusiastic greeting. "You've been working too much lately." Deacon laughed, settling onto our sectional sofa. "She's right, man. When's the last time we all just had fun together?" I saw an opportunity to inject some life into the evening. "Let's play a game," I suggested, moving closer to where Deacon sat. "Something silly, like truth or dare." Helen, washing dishes in our open-plan kitchen, glanced over with a slight frown. "Isn't that a bit juvenile for adults?" "That's exactly why it'll be fun," I countered, feeling emboldened by Maya's encouraging smile. "We're all too serious these days." Ethan looked up from his laptop reluctantly. "I'm really not in the mood for games, Cal." "See? This is what I mean," I said, letting a note of frustration creep into my voice. "You're always too tired, too busy, too something." I turned to Deacon with an exaggerated pout. "At least someone around here knows how to have a good time." Deacon shifted uncomfortably but played along. "All right, truth or dare it is, but nothing too crazy." The game started harmlessly. Silly questions about embarrassing moments, dares to sing off-key songs. But as the wine flowed, and I felt increasingly ignored by my husband, I decided to push boundaries. "Deacon, I dare you to show us your magic fingers that you're always bragging about," I said with a laugh, extending my arm toward him. "You know, that massage technique you mentioned." "Calantha," Helen said quietly from the kitchen, her voice carrying a warning, but I was already committed to the moment. "Oh, come on, it's just for fun. Right, Ethan? You don't mind if your best friend shows off his skills, do you?" Ethan looked up sharply, his jaw tightening. "I think that's enough games for tonight." "Don't be such a killjoy," I said, letting Deacon take my hand and demonstrate some pressure point technique on my wrist, then my shoulder. The attention felt intoxicating after weeks of feeling invisible in my own home. "See? It's nothing inappropriate, just friends having fun." Deacon's hands moved to my waist as I laughed at something he whispered, and I could see Ethan's face darkening. Sophie appeared at the top of the stairs, looking confused by the tension in the room. "Daddy, why does everyone sound angry?" "Nobody's angry, sweetheart," I called up, but Ethan was already standing, his laptop snapping shut. "I think everyone should head home," he said quietly, his voice controlled but strained. "It's getting late." "Ethan's right," Paul said quickly, clearly sensing the undercurrent of tension. "We should let you folks get Sophie to bed." As everyone gathered their things, I felt a mixture of exhilaration and annoyance. I'd gotten the attention I wanted, but now Ethan was making me look like the villain. "You're seriously overreacting," I told him as our guests filed out, Deacon giving me a lingering look that didn't go unnoticed. Helen paused at the door, her eyes meeting mine with unmistakable disapproval. "Calantha, dear, sometimes it's better to think before we act." After everyone left, I found Ethan in our bedroom, but he wasn't getting ready for bed. Instead, he was sitting in the dark with his laptop open, the screen's glow illuminating his furrowed brow as he scrolled through what looked like security footage from our driveway camera. "What are you doing?" I asked, but he didn't answer. The silence that followed felt heavier than any argument we'd ever had. Sunday brunch at the local bistro was supposed to be our chance to reset, to show everyone that Ethan and I were fine. The whole family was there, his parents, his sister Carolyn, Maya, and little Sophie, who had been unusually quiet all weekend. I chose the table, making sure to sit across from Deacon rather than next to Ethan. The conversation flowed around typical family topics: work, Sophie's school, Paul's retirement plans, but I could feel the undercurrent of tension from Friday night. "Deacon, you should tell everyone about that cooking class you took," I said brightly, cutting into my eggs Benedict. "He's become quite the chef, much better with his hands than some people I know." The comment landed exactly as I intended. The table went quiet, and I could see Ethan's knuckles whiten around his coffee cup. Carolyn's eyes widened in shock, while Maya smirked into her mimosa. "Calantha," Paul said gently, "perhaps we could talk about something else." "What? I'm just complimenting Deacon on his culinary skills," I said innocently, enjoying the way Deacon squirmed in his seat. "There's nothing wrong with appreciating talent when you see it." Sophie pushed her pancakes around her plate, no longer eating. "Mummy, why are you being mean to Daddy?" "I'm not being mean, sweetheart. Daddy's just being sensitive today." Ethan excused himself to use the restroom, and when he returned, his face was pale and set in stone. The rest of brunch passed in strained silence, with Carolyn shooting me disapproving looks and Helen practically radiating frost. Later that evening, I couldn't resist texting Deacon. "Thanks for playing along today. I think our little games are driving Ethan crazy. Our secret is safe, right?" His response came hours later. "Maybe we should cool it, Cal. I don't want to cause problems." But I was already planning my next move. If Ethan wanted to act like a jealous husband, I'd give him something to really worry about. What I didn't know was that Ethan was in his study, methodically going through our phone bills, highlighting every call and text between Deacon and me. He'd started a folder on his computer labeled documentation, and it was growing thicker by the day. Wednesday evening found me standing outside Deacon's modern downtown apartment, having told Ethan I was spending the evening with Maya. I needed to vent to someone who would understand, someone who wouldn't make me feel guilty for wanting a little excitement in my life. "Cal, what are you doing here?" Deacon opened the door in surprise, his hair still damp from a shower. "I just needed to get out of the house," I said, pushing past him into his sleek living room. Ethan's been impossible since Sunday. Cold, suspicious, acting like I committed some crime. Deacon closed the door reluctantly. "Maybe you should talk to him instead of me." "That's just it. He won't talk. He just sits there judging me." I settled onto his leather couch, perhaps sitting closer than necessary. "Remember how much fun we used to have, before everyone got so serious and boring? We're not kids anymore, Cal. We're adults with responsibilities." "That doesn't mean we can't enjoy ourselves," I said, letting my hand brush his arm. "That little game we played Friday night, that was harmless fun. Why does everyone have to make it into something dirty?" Deacon pulled back slightly. "Because you're married to my best friend, and I respect that." "Do you? Or are you just scared of what people might think?" I challenged, leaning closer. "Because I remember a time when you weren't afraid of anything. For a moment, I thought I saw the old Deacon, the one who used to flirt shamelessly, who made me feel alive and desired. But then he stood up, creating distance between us. I think you should go home to your family." As I gathered my purse, stung by his rejection, I glanced out his window and froze. Ethan's silver sedan was parked across the street, and I could see his silhouette behind the wheel. The drive home was a blur of panic and planning. How long had he been there? What had he seen? By the time I pulled into our driveway, I had my story ready. Ethan was waiting in the kitchen, his expression unreadable. "How was your evening with Maya?" he asked quietly. "Fine. We just talked, watched a movie." The lie came easily, but something in his eyes made my stomach clench. "What movie?" Some romantic comedy. I don't remember the title. I headed toward the stairs, desperate to escape his scrutiny. I'm tired. I'm going to bed. Calantha. His voice stopped me on the third step. Were you with Deacon tonight? The direct question caught me off guard, but I'd come too far to back down now. Of course not. I told you I was with Maya. Why would you even ask that? Just wondering, he said, but his tone suggested he knew more than he was letting on. That night, I lay awake listening to him make a phone call from his study, his voice too low for me to make out the words. But something about the conversation's length and his serious tone made my chest tight with an emotion I wasn't ready to name. The following Sunday's family dinner at Helen and Paul's house felt like walking into a courtroom. The moment I stepped through the door, I could sense the shift in the family dynamic. Helen's usual warm greeting was replaced with a polite nod, and Carolyn barely looked up from helping Sophie with her coloring book. How's everyone doing? I asked brightly, determined to act normal despite the tension crackling through the air. We're concerned, Carolyn said bluntly, her protective instincts for her brother clearly activated. About you and Ethan, about Sophie. There's nothing to be concerned about, I replied, taking a seat at their dining table. Ethan's been in a mood lately, but that's his issue to work through. Maya arrived shortly after, immediately positioning herself as my ally. Exactly. Men go through these phases where they get all possessive and weird. It'll pass. Helen set down a casserole dish with more force than necessary. This isn't about phases, Calantha. This is about respect. For your marriage, for your family. I haven't disrespected anyone, I said, my voice rising slightly. I've done nothing wrong except try to have a little fun in a house that's become as exciting as a funeral home. Paul attempted to mediate. Now, let's all take a breath here. Whatever's going on, we can work through it as a family. There's nothing to work through, I insisted, looking around the table at their skeptical faces. Ethan is being paranoid and controlling. He questions everywhere I go, everyone I talk to. That's not healthy behavior. Ethan, who had been silent throughout the meal, finally spoke. I asked you one question about where you were Wednesday night. And I answered it, but apparently that wasn't enough for you. Sophie looked between us with wide, worried eyes. Are you and Daddy getting divorced? The question hit the table like a bomb. Everyone froze, and I felt a stab of guilt seeing our daughter's frightened expression. Of course not, baby, I said quickly. Daddy and I are just having a disagreement. All married couples do that sometimes. But Sophie wasn't convinced. She slipped from her chair and climbed onto Ethan's lap, wrapping her small arms around his neck. I want to go home, Daddy. We'll leave soon, sweetheart, he murmured, his eyes never leaving my face. After dinner, as we gathered our things to leave, Ethan did something that caught me completely off guard. Can I see your phone? He asked quietly. What? Why? I just want to check something. The request felt like an invasion, a violation of my privacy. No, absolutely not. I'm not a child, Ethan. I don't need you monitoring my communications. I'm not trying to monitor anything. No! I said loudly enough that everyone in the house could hear. This is exactly what I'm talking about. This controlling, suspicious behavior. It's toxic. I stormed out to the car, leaving Ethan to make awkward goodbyes and collect Sophie. During the silent drive home, I stared out the window and told myself I was the victim here. I was the one being treated unfairly, questioned and doubted for no reason. But that night, as I listened to Ethan make another lengthy phone call from his study, I couldn't shake the feeling that the ground was shifting beneath my feet in ways I didn't fully understand. The next morning, I woke to find him already gone for work and Sophie eating breakfast with a babysitter I didn't recognize. Where's Daddy? I asked, confused. He had an early meeting, the sitter replied. He said he'd call you later. But when later came, the call wasn't from Ethan. It was from a law office I'd never heard of, asking me to confirm my address for important legal documents. The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a courier who required my signature and photo ID. My hand shook as I read the law firm's letterhead, and my stomach dropped as I scanned the formal language about dissolution of marriage and custody arrangements. I immediately called Ethan, but his phone went straight to voicemail. I tried his office, but his assistant said he was unavailable. Panic rising in my throat, I called Deacon. "Did you know about this?" I demanded when he answered. "Know about what?" "Ethan's filing for divorce. He's actually doing it, Deacon. Over nothing." There was a long pause. "Cal, maybe it's not over nothing." "You're taking his side too?" I couldn't believe the betrayal. "I thought you understood. I thought you knew this was all just harmless fun." "I think you should talk to a lawyer," he said quietly. "And maybe you should think about what you really want, because this isn't a game anymore." After he hung up, I called Maya in tears. "He's trying to destroy our family over his own insecurities," I sobbed. "He's making me out to be some kind of villain." Maya was appropriately outraged on my behalf, promising to help me fight this ridiculous overreaction. But even as she spoke, I could hear doubt creeping into her voice. The real shock came 3 days later, when I received a summons for an emergency custody hearing. Attached were documents I never expected to see: time-stamped security footage from Deacon's building, phone records highlighting every call and text between us, even GPS data from my phone showing my location during times I'd claimed to be elsewhere. I spent the next 2 days frantically trying to delete messages and call logs, but it was too late. Ethan had been methodically documenting everything for weeks, building a case while I thought I was just having fun. The night before the hearing, Sophie came to my room in tears. "Daddy says I might have to choose who to live with. I don't want to choose, Mummy. I want us all to live together." Looking at my daughter's tear-streaked face, I felt the first real pang of regret. Not for what I'd done, I still believed I'd done nothing truly wrong, but for how it was affecting her. "It's going to be okay, baby," I promised, though I was no longer sure that was true. The family courthouse was smaller than I'd expected, but the weight of the moment felt enormous as I sat at the defendant's table with my hastily hired attorney. Across the aisle, Ethan sat with his lawyer, looking calm and determined. Behind him, Helen, Paul, and Carolyn formed a wall of support, while Maya sat behind me, her presence feeling suddenly inadequate. "Your Honor," Ethan's attorney began, "we have substantial evidence of emotional infidelity, deception, and behavior that has created an unstable environment for the minor child." I watched in growing horror as they presented their case with surgical precision. The security footage of me entering and leaving Deacon's building. The phone records showing dozens of calls and texts during times I'd claimed to be elsewhere. Screenshots of messages I thought I'd deleted, including the one about our little secret. When it was my turn to speak, I tried to explain that it had all been innocent, that Ethan was overreacting to harmless flirtation. But under cross-examination, my story began to fall apart. "Mrs. Dorr, you testified that you were with your sister on Wednesday evening, but your phone's GPS data shows you were at Mr. Tiernan's apartment building. Can you explain this discrepancy?" I may have stopped by briefly, just to say hello. "For 3 hours? We talked. That's not a crime." "No, but lying about it is concerning, especially when it comes to determining what's in the best interest of your daughter." I tried to summon tears, to show the court how I was being victimized by Ethan's jealousy and controlling behavior. But the judge seemed unmoved by my emotional display, more interested in the documented evidence than my explanations. The final blow came when Deacon was called as a witness. I'd expected him to support my version of events, to confirm that nothing inappropriate had happened between us. Instead, he told the truth. "Mrs. Dorr did visit my apartment on several occasions without her husband's knowledge," he testified. "She asked me to keep these visits secret. While nothing physical happened, her behavior made me uncomfortable. and I eventually asked her to stop contacting me. When the judge announced her decision, temporary primary custody to Ethan, supervised visitation for me, and immediate financial safeguards, I felt the world tilt on its axis. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. I was supposed to be the sympathetic party, the wife whose husband couldn't handle a little harmless fun. As we filed out of the courtroom, a bailiff approached me with another set of documents. "Mrs. Dorr, you're being served." The divorce papers were thick and official, stamped with the court seal, and witnessed by everyone I'd once considered family. Helen embraced Ethan, while Paul comforted Sophie, who was crying quietly. Carolyn offered to help with whatever Ethan needed, and even Maya looked shaken by the proceedings. Standing alone in the courthouse hallway, holding papers that would dissolve my marriage and reshape my life, I finally understood what I'd lost. It wasn't just my husband or my home or even my daily access to my daughter. I'd lost my family's respect, my reputation, and my own sense of who I was. All for what I'd convinced myself was just innocent fun, just a little attention from someone who made me feel desired. The worst part wasn't the legal consequences or the financial implications. It was the look in Sophie's eyes when she'd asked why I couldn't just say sorry and make everything go back to normal. Because some games, once you start playing them, change all the rules forever. And some lines, once crossed, can never be uncrossed. As I walked out of the courthouse alone, I realized that Ethan hadn't overreacted at all. He'd simply protected himself and our daughter from someone who had forgotten the difference between harmless fun and harmful betrayal. The woman who had let her husband's best friend touch her just for fun was about to discover that actions have consequences, and some prices are higher than we ever imagine when we're busy justifying our choices. The divorce papers in my hand weren't just legal documents. They were receipts for a debt I'd been accumulating without realizing the bill would eventually come due. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city you are watching.